Good morning, everyone. As you can probably see, and as Richard has alluded to, I'm a vegetable producer. We produce in a very beautiful little part of the world, or I think it's a pretty good part of the world, about an hour and a half west of Brisbane, in a little valley called the Nuffield Valley. We produce mainly leafy vegetables for both the processing and fresh market. And up until this year, we have actually produced 12 months of the year. We've changed that system for this year. My Nuffield journey, excuse me, my Nuffield journey today has been about the fourth most fulfilling thing that I think I've done in my life. Behind marrying my wife Jules, I've got three beautiful kids. Occasionally, nailing the lettuce crop, there lies Nuffield. So it's pretty high up in my list of things that I've done, and I'm immensely proud of it. So before I start, I'd like to thank a few people who gave me more than opportunity to do this Nuffield scholarship. Firstly, my beautiful wife Jules, she's here today. Often when asked what my doing Nuffield would mean to her, she would often say, probably not much. The phantom that rocks in pretty late and deposits the clothes, the dirty clothes in the laundry basket, and eats the microwave meal out of the microwave and leaves it before anyone wakes, won't be here, so I probably won't notice much of a change at all. And as much as this part is true, I know that the huge toll on basically being a single parent for 4 months was huge on you, and I'll always be indebted for basically keeping it together. To my mum, dad and Sandy, who is my brother, in my absence you carried on our business systematically and thoroughly. I know that in the vegetable game it can often be a rocky ship, and you always found ways to steady that. And I also hope that with the doors that Nuffield is opening all the time, that someday that it will repay itself tenfold over. To our staff, they carried on our business very professionally whilst I was away. They all had to do more than their fair share to give me the opportunity. To Jim Gelch and the Nuffield board, I thank you for believing in me more than anything. You gave me the opportunity to grow, as a scholar invariably does when they undertake an Nuffield scholarship. And last but not least, there's Woolies. They're my sponsor, who without them, this report and my presentation wouldn't be possible. I'm immensely proud of my relationship with Woolworths, both through Nuffield and professionally. And I hope that through this presentation that Woolies' relationship with the Nuffield brand will only become stronger. Right, down to business. My personal Nuffield experience initially started in New Zealand, where we met the other 50-odd contemporary scholars for the Contemporary Scholars Brief. They're quite a dynamic bunch of blokes, and every one of them was operating at a fairly high level. It was a great place for not just me to get an understanding of how other countries were thinking about ag in Australia, but how they viewed their own countries and ag in that country. Next, I was off on the Global Focus program. I travelled with 3 Aussies, 1 Irish woman, a Pom, and a Tasmanian. Make it worse, he's a dairy. These guys and girls on return home would be more like brothers and sisters. Some of the great moments of your Nuffield scholarship is driving around, like we drove around Canada in a big black Suburban, and just bouncing ideas off each other. You learn so much from that experience. So as I said, Global Focus was 6 weeks. We travelled through the US, Canada, China, the Philippines, France and Ireland. In what can probably only be best described as a whirlwind tour of ag. or life is the greatest race. I returned home after 6 weeks, pretty well battered, bruised and exhausted. But I was keen as mustard to get out and start my individual study. Now, horticulture in Australia is an amazingly dynamic and yet competitive place to do business. The majority of farms in Australia compete not just with imported product, we also compete directly with our next door neighbouring farms. I started my Nuffield study almost 18 months ago purely in the production side of horticulture. Namely looking at the how, the where, the when and the what that we grow. And I originally wanted to challenge whether or not we could grow higher value crops in lower value land through modifying the growing environment with shelter cropping and companion planting, thus increasing a return on investment. Now, it's no secret that for the past 2 years, through climatic, as you can see, economical, environmental and ethical pressures, that horticulture in Australia has struggled. In my eyes, we're basically on our knees. And so travelling out of my comfort zone and on my own for 10 weeks on my individual study, I started to think that maybe somewhere in amongst all of that, I was probably heading down the wrong track with my studies. I was increasingly looking at ways of mitigating business risk, and I wanted to look at how farms became stronger through the different business models that they employed. What I wanted to achieve was that maybe the Derek Schultzes of this world, the Timmy Hazletts and the Andrew Dewars of Australia, in 10 to 20 years' time are still doing what we do. What I wanted to be able to do was maybe find a business model that could be implemented here in Australia that could negate a family business going through similar situations that SP Exports are going through at the moment. So as I said, I travelled to 15 countries, with most of my time spent in Europe and the US. In Europe, I travelled through Spain, Germany, Netherlands, France and England, visiting many businesses and farms along the way. My findings in Europe were that as an industry, the EU vegetable farmers were still hamstrung by the E. coli outbreak in sprouted seeds of 2008. And on the whole, most of the farming businesses were only running at about half pace. In relation to this presentation, which is more on business models, I was given access to, through the Nuffield, what would I call it, tree, access to some very intricate workings on a couple of business models which I am implementing into our business back home in Australia. However, due to this being a considerable commercial advantage, I was also asked to sign some confidentiality clauses, so I can't allude to a few of those. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on the US. In the US, I found the most interesting models for growing high-risk crops where the farmer was not the bearer of all risk. And thus, this is where I'm going to focus a lot of my presentation. In the Salinas Valley, California, known as the salad bowl of the world, I was lucky enough to be guest to a company called TNA. Now, TNA are a third-generation family farming business, farming 30,000 acres of leafy vegetables. They farm in the Central and Salinas Valley, and they also have an operation on the Mexican border, or Yuma, which they call the desert. They have around 5,000 staff, and this includes some 77 harvesting crews running at any one time. And they also have about 50 growers that grow for them year-round, either on a contract basis or on a profit share type system. Such was the openness of their business that I was invited to be Bob Antle, who is basically a 70-year-old CEO of Catamira and Antle. I was invited to be his mini-me for basically a week. he invited me into his boardroom meetings, and he also invited me into negotiations with the 3 head fresh produce managers with Walmart. Now, the way that he negotiated in that meeting has changed the way that I look at negotiations for sales, and it will stay with me forever. The main 2 systems that TNA employed, firstly, and probably the most simple and the most logical for Australian farms, is vertical integration or value add. TNA operate a fully integrated closed system from farm ownership through to internal agronomy, through to logistics, through to packaging, manufacturing. Bob Ander's comment to me on the need to value add or vertically integrate was, quote, "Son, it's the only way that I can control quality and inputs. It's the only way for our business." The second model, which most interested me, was the moving of the risk, potentially, from the farmer up the tree, through the supply chain, closer to the end user. And this is a little bit contentious because it's a very difficult model to apply in Australian horticulture. TNA, however, do this with several models, and in my eyes, the most effective way is through crop ownership. They have some 50 growers, as I said before, who grow for the year round. And they've developed a model based on crop stages and payment processes according to the growth, and then eventually with a yield bonus system in place at the end. A contract is drawn where if the crop is surplus to TNA's requirements, the grower actually gets his growing input costs. He then also gets a lease payment for that land on top of that growing input cost. The other reason that they've gone down this track is it doesn't erode management skills in the sector. What was happening with TNA is as they were taking over smaller farms, they were losing the management skills to run those smaller farms. Of those 5,000 employees, I think Bob told me that there was about 3,500 of them that don't speak English. So having people on the ground for them with local knowledge and local industry and for that vocabulary was essential for their business. Now you may ask, why would TNA go down the track of taking on more risk? It's something that I asked. But the reason is that TNA have been able to go to the likes of Walmart and global conglomerates that are squeezing the hell out of our industry. And they've been able to sell their product on the back of sustainability. So they've used the sustainability guidelines in each business, and they've been able to wiggle in there and say to these guys, look, you've got a sustainability practice in place. Why are you not paying us for that product if we're sustainably looking after ag? A lot of the time, Bob was actually able to negotiate a higher price for that product, which then resulted in him having a greater profit margin. So I had a fairly good look at this from TNA's perspective, but I wanted to check what the farmers thought from our perspective. So as for the guys that know me, I went to a bar. Just happened to be the bar that all the lettuce growers go to every Thursday about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm pretty sure more lettuce is grown in that bar than in the whole of the Select Valley, but that's something else. And I met this man, Jose Ramirez. Now he's a contract seed grower for TNA. So TNA have, as I was saying, the vertically integrated. They own seed, they own genetics. So it's a complex business. But I wanted to find out from Jose what he thought about the systems that they were employing, whether it was working for him. Jose's reply was quick, simple and succinct. We used to be on the open market and would lose money on a regular basis. Now it's not even an option. We make money on every crop. So in conclusion, for Australian horticulture to succeed in what is going to be an ever competitive arena, I think we've got to do our sums a little better on our crops. I think we have to take emotion out of our decision-making process. Gone are the days of the family farm being able to carry on as a Dad and Dave operation. Most of the family farms that I'm in contact with now are almost multi-million-dollar, fully corporate structured and professional operations. I think if we can possibly vertically integrate, it can only help. By vertically integrating, we can possibly have the opportunity to take a couple of bites at the cherry and thus maybe increasing profit. And I think we should be challenging our end users' sustainability programs. Because at the end of the day, these guys, these multi-corporates, are hiding behind green ticks, they're hiding behind seals of sustainability, and they're expecting consumer to pay for that. But what they're not doing is they're not passing that back to the grower. So what we need to do is we need to challenge their sustainability. And I don't think as an industry that we can possibly do that as a single person. I think everybody and in every aspect of ag needs to be challenging these corporations. The other thing I think that we should do is we should dare to be different. Because in our industry, differentiation is the key to success. So why? Well, I'm probably the youngest, or not probably the youngest, but I'm the newest vegetable grower that's come into the industry that I know of. We've only been there for 4 years. We've seen rapid growth in our business. But I'm immensely proud of the fact that in this room today, there are 3 generations of Dewars, which some people might say lock the doors. 2 of us are in agribusiness. That's great. But wouldn't it be great if agribusiness was sexy enough to get the 3rd of them? Thank you.
When you talked about challenging the sustainability, you're referring to the economic sustainability from a grower's perspective and challenging the duopolies and their plans to that. Is that what you mean?
Well, no, I simply mean that there's been a huge push towards sustainability, towards environmentally friendly practices on the part of these big corporations that are pushing prices down in our industry. What I'm saying by that is that they're hiding behind this. They're hiding behind these seals, and they're using that to gather more profit in their own business. But what they aren't doing is transferring that cost of conformance down the line to the grower. So we're being asked to be more sustainable, more environmentally friendly, more ethically friendly, yet there's no compensation for that through the system that they're offering at the moment. And by challenging it, I mean go to a big corporation and say to them, you're saying that it's sustainable. How is it sustainable when for 12 months, for 11 of 12 months of the year, you're asking producers to produce at less than the cost of production? Now, there's no sustainability in that.
Andrew, what view did you form of labour issues after going to the Salinas Valley and seeing it chock full of Mexicans and Europe's full of Eastern Europeans? How does that actually affect your thinking about the productivity of Australian horticulture?
Australia and Europe are probably aligned, but Europe's further ahead in that mechanism is fast becoming an everyday thing in horticulture in Europe. The US, that's one of their downfalls. I'm not sure whether it's this year or next year, but they're going to be introducing a bill which says that in the past they've always sort of had a blind eye to the Mexican influence in Salinas, simply because they can't get the workers, as we can't and as Europeans can't. However, due to the fact that their systems and their growing systems are so labour orientated, when this bill is passed, where I'm fairly sure that it's going to wipe out 90% of the workforce that can't be visaed or won't have home country status. America's going to have to do a big shift because the American people don't want to work. The only people that do want to work are the Mexicans. So my view is that technology is going to come in a big way in horticulture in the next few years, and it's on the back of the need. It's on the back of the need to have it.
Andrew, I'd like to ask you about you saying a very young player in the industry, only 4 years. How easy it's been to get into the industry in terms of the acceptance from your industry peers and the perception that you think that they see what you're trying to do?
There's two parts to that. Ease into the industry was a natural progression in our business. We lost, through the bureaucratic stroke of a pen, 45% of our water allocation in 2005, I'm pretty sure, Dad. 2006. Mum and Dad were basically to the stage where they didn't know how they could sustain the property, so we had to do something more with it. So we looked at high value crops. High value crops were vegetables from what we were doing, so that was easy. That was an easy decision to make. Information transfer within our industry is tough. As I alluded to, we compete daily with our neighbours, and it's not just against the wheat board or against the Namoi Cottons or whoever else. We compete directly for shelf space. We don't have the option in our industry, in the leafy industry, to export any of these products. So shelf life, quality and availability are the three factors that limit how much money you're going to make, basically, what your return's going to be. So in that regard, it's been very difficult to get information out of our industry. I think it's changing. I'm glad it's changing. There's guys like Tim and Derek and we have a young growers group around home that meet regularly. And I'm always in contact with the growers around our area. I don't know whether through Nuffield or how it's happened, but they've sort of enlisted me as the person that they come to with issues and with any difficulties they've had. Just last week I had a grower that copped the same hailstorm that we got 3 weeks ago. He's been growing for 25 years and he's a bloody good grower. In tears on the phone. No answers. But the problem is, at least he had me to talk to, so we worked out a few things and we actually sent some product of his through our contracts. And so hopefully with those sorts of things in place, we're going to get more transparency in the industry.
Andrew, one of the things you said with a great deal of conviction was the lifetime lesson you felt as though you learned with negotiation technique. You just can't leave us in.
Yeah, I was waiting for that. Bob Andrew is a man. Yeah. His ability to sell on the back of, it was a factual thing. He knew his product, he knew his market, he knew his discipline in the way that he looked at those three guys. He knew those three guys, as in he'd done research on those three guys. He knew that one of them liked the New York Yankees. He knew everything about their thing, and he was able to burrow into them in that side of the negotiation. He gained a competitive advantage out of knowing basically his enemy better than they knew themselves. The other thing that he did was he knew he was basically going down the same track, trying to sell sustainability. But what he did was he knew their policies better than they did. So when they questioned it, he came up with answers that they didn't know. So at the end of the day, he had more about their sustainability policies than they did, and he was able to use that to their advantages. So I think if you know, basically, it's a bad term, your enemy, as well as they know themselves, you can use that to your advantage, and that's what he did.